We had like 553 RSVPs when I came in. A lot of people do that and then they watch the recording, but it is, it tells you everything you need to know about how in the foremost of our minds this topic is. Is the documentary feature really on life support? It is, particularly timely, I think, coming on the heels of Sundance, which will be, I think, a big part of this discussion. It's, I want to put it in context before we begin. Yeah, I mean, I don't even probably have to say this, the world we're living in now. We are in the middle of an attempted coup going on with the U.S. government. The fires are still, they're not raging already. The consequences of the fires in LA are still being felt by so many of our friends and colleagues. And it can make it feel like the problems of us as a community, in comparison are relatively unimportant. But it's really important. It may be more important than ever because of the role documentaries play in the culture and the impact that they can have and how necessary they are. So it can feel very doom and gloomy, and we will touch on, well, there'll be plenty of doom and gloom today, but we want to also focus on what can we do if the old models are broken or breaking? What are some of the new models that can replace it? What are some examples of films that are managing to get out there and get attention and find an audience? So that's what we'll try and do. We want to leave you, we do not want you feeling hopeless and helpless. There are actions we all need to do and take, and we want to figure that out as a community, and that's part of what we're here for today. So, with that in mind, we're going to do something a little different than we do usually on these things. We normally, I talk to the invited guests for the first hour, and then we open it up for questions from attendees for the last half hour. I want to make it into more of an open forum, and maybe halfway through the discussion, invite all of you guys to use the raised hand function, and I'll call on you. And feel free to share your thoughts and ideas and hopefully, some will formulate as we're talking. But I want to think of this more as like a think tank or a forum, as opposed to we have a bunch of experts here giving you all the answers, when really we're just going over the questions and trying to figure things out together. So with that in mind, I want to welcome our special guests, Iyabo Boyd and Kathleen Lingo. Very briefly, Iyabo is a writer, director, producer, both in fiction and documentary, and the founder and executive director of Brown Girls Doc Mafia. And Kathleen is producer as well, but also the longtime executive director, I guess that was your title, of New York Times Op Docs. And then you ran the documentary division there, I believe, for a while. And now has like a fantastic Substack that I highly recommend to everyone. There are a couple of really essential ones, and I think that Brian Newman's subgenre newsletter, Anthony Kaufman has a great Substack. Kathleen, if you guys know of others that you highly recommend, put it in the chat. Anyway, let's get going. Iyabo, can you first of all tell us a little bit about Brown Girls Doc Mafia and both anecdotally, and you say you have some data. about the experiences of some of your members in terms of what's going on for them in funding and distribution. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, hey everybody. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure. So Brown Girls Doc Mafia is a nonprofit that will be turning 10 years old this fall, actually, which is really exciting. And we support women and non-binary people of color working in the documentary industry, all roles, all experience levels, all ages. It's a membership organization. We have 5,000 members around the world. We have a directory. It's just browngirls.mafia.org. Oh, thank you. There's a directory there for anyone who's hiring or looking to collaborate or, excuse me, funders or folks working in the biz want to track potential, artists. There's an amazing directory there. We do mentorship and like artist development programming for our community internally, bringing in mentors and taking folks to festivals, as Stewart does as well. And yeah, we've had 2 years of fellowships that involved grant writing, grant making, the Black Directors Fellowship, as well as a Sustainable Artist Fellowship that will come back hopefully next year. And yeah, I mean, I can t say more as things come to mind if I've forgotten anything. Um, but in terms of where things are with the org, so the data I have is very, 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 very nascent. It's only a sample. We're in the middle of a survey right now, and it's only a sample of 65 people so far. So keep that in mind. But it's tough out there. I think that before 2020, I always considered documentary a really expensive hobby that we all decided to do for some crazy reason. And then it felt like for a couple of years that maybe it was like, oh, can this be a career? Maybe this is actually turning into a career. And then nope, slam in the face. It's not a career anymore. Sorry, guys. Um, so I feel like that kind of sensation it has come back to me. And I also want to lift up um, some words from the great Marcia Smith from Firelight Media, who commented at the Visionaries Luncheon this fall that a lot of the challenges and complaints that the mainstream documentary community, reading between the lines, sort of like more white filmmakers are talking about how jobs are drying up, how things are harder, et cetera, et cetera. And Marcia was just lifting up like, hey, it's always been like that for us. Just FYI, like this is not a new challenge. So just wanting to like put those kinds of frames
Right.
in place for where
By
things
the
are.
way, funding has always been hard for documentaries.
Yeah,
Always.
yeah. Um, so, folks are continuing to like 44% of this group are still making docs as their primary income, which is, I think, impressive. 20% of them are not in the doc field as their main income. Um, a lot of folks are working for other companies. They're working in nonprofits. They're working um, in fields outside of the documentary. Um, Crew, folks are having trouble finding like just crew gigs. My partner is a sound engineer on set and had like 3 gigs all of 2024. And that same kind of anecdotes I'm seeing from the data in BGDM, whereas he was a professional sound mixer for the last 10 years full time, totally living fine off of it. So that, the career world has really felt like it's dried up. Folks are talking about, when there are jobs, if we have a jobs board, folks seeing jobs on the jobs board, it's oftentimes for more advanced roles. There aren't as many, entry level positions. And folks who are making films who aren't beginners, but like maybe also aren't Dawn Porter, the people in the middle are feeling like you get crunched and stuck in this middle space where there's not a lot of room to grow because the folks that are hiring filmmakers are looking for more of the names and for folks that have made bigger splashes, even though there's a lot of really amazing qualified folks who are just looking for to put themselves forward. Folks are, while some of them who are leaving the doc industry in terms of their main income are seeing it as an opportunity to do that project you've always been wanting to do that you've been always like putting on the back burner because you had to pay the bills doing other things. And they're emphasizing that more and more, which I think is important and for artists to do in tough times is to circle back to the things that are most meaningful to you and try to find ways to get it forward, get pushed forward. But yeah, there's no answers here at all. People are trying not to take pro bono or deferred work, but many of them are out of the goodness of their hearts and also like wanting to contribute to their artist communities, wanting to support communities that need it. Um, but that's becoming harder and harder to do. Of course, the strikes and the pandemic has set a lot of folks back for years, as I've mentioned.
Sure.
So there's plenty of more sad things to say, but I
All
can
right.
leave it
We're, we'll we'll turn it around
at.
in time. Um, Kathleen, you just came back from Sundance. You've written a couple of art posts about it. So I'm curious to hear your takeaway. As far as I know, I mean, I think I just learned right before this that one doc got sold out of Sundance. The Perfect Neighbor apparently just made like a $5 million sale to Netflix. That is a anomaly. So what were some of your takeaways coming out of Sundance? What was the feeling there among, particularly among the doc filmmakers and professionals that you spoke with?
Well, on a bright note, I would say the lineup was really strong. Because I'm so grateful, working at the New York Times for 11 years. I got to go to Sundance for the last 7 years in a row. So I've had the incredible fortune of seeing a lot of the documentary lineups, and some years are better than others. And this was definitely a great year. I mean, even the things that weren't my favorites, everything was interesting, good, important work. And I think that that's really something to hold up right now. Like all this, of course, the business and opportunity side, we need to dig into and come up with new models. But the work we do is really important. And I know that, for a lot of years, we thought of documentaries in terms of ways to reach new people, change minds. And one of the things I felt this year watching these films and thinking about the current political climate is actually these films aren't going to change anyone's minds, but that doesn't mean they're not important. It's because these films are for all of us that care about these issues and care about the world and want to make the world a better place. And especially right now, to see filmmakers who are trying to make art that reflect our current moment, that are about these important things, I think reinforces for all of us that what we're doing is valuable in the world and also sort of is like a support and a motivator to keep doing what we're doing because there's so much great work out there. I mean, Perfect Neighbor is just, it's such a stunning film and it's so important. It doesn't fit in. It's not a neat story. It's complicated. It's dark. It's also about the power of mothers and family. It's such a fabulous movie. And that's really should be our North Star at the end of the day. But how we get there and what we're expecting, I think that's the piece that needs to change. And the conversation everyone's having at Sundance and that I have, I've been honestly having it for the last 2 years is that the model is broken. I started in documentary as an intern in 2007 for Alex Gibney when he won the Oscar for Taxi the Dark Side. And in that moment, I was like, wow, you can make important movies, they can get recognized, but there were no streamers back then. Alex had a distribution deal to get it into theaters, and then it ended up on cable. It was these stages of distribution. And we're really kind of back to that model, I would say. The streamers are not going to save us. It's not going to come back. So I think the conversation to have today is like, how can we move forward, accepting the reality that like nothing's going to come back. Everything is done, and now we have to figure out a new way forward.
You mean the golden age of documentary is over? Uh,
I mean, I don't honestly think it ever
I
existed. I
know,
think
I
the
know.
whole thing is a myth. And as I made and sold films through the so-called golden age, it was still never easy.
Um, I mean, you asked the perfect question for the day, which is, yeah, these old models are broken. What can replace it? How do we move forward? If that's like the conversation on everybody's mind, what are some ideas? By the way, I'm throwing this question out to everyone. I mean, when we get to the portion of this where we're going to open up for sharing, you know, please, ideas, thoughts, all will be welcome. But you know, Iyabo, I kind of want to get this off of funding and into distribution because, like I said before, funding has always been, you know, an issue. It will always be an issue. I mean, we're just going to have to probably make our films for less money these days because there's less money available. And God knows what's going to happen to, you know, NEH or NEA or any kind of federal grants.
Yeah.
But in terms of distribution, you know, short of, you know, DIY distribution, um, what do you see as possibilities? What are your members perhaps doing that, you know, has caught your attention?
I mean, I don't have any answers, unfortunately, but I think that one thing that's clear that we have enabled a handful of companies to decide this for us. And Brown Girls is a grassroots organization, and it will continue to lean on the idea of like DIY in a certain level of us learning how to do marketing ourselves, us learning how to build audiences ourselves, us learning how to build platforms ourselves, how to work together a lot better, and taking some of that power and money back. I think that like there are several individuals who could change this entire situation today if they wanted to, but they don't want to. So it's not really about like us trying to navigate or figure out other ways. We have to, I mean, I don't know. My natural inclination is like do it yourself, build it yourself, build it with community, or go back to the way things have were more analog style where you're like have your clipboard at your screening and you're getting people's email addresses and you're really pounding the pavement with like building your own community. um, and all of us as an org as a industry or as a group of communities who are interested in the same work needing to like lean more into supporting each other a lot better. Because it's not just that, um, like even when people have small screenings, are we showing up for each other? Are we going out? Like it's hard because we're in this post-pandemic, things are so easy to watch at home, yada yada. But like that's another thing that like we all have the connections, right? To be able to do a couple screenings and support each other. We could, but we have to show up for that too. Um, so I don't know. That's one of potential. And so it's either going back or it's like, reinventing the whole thing, maybe in some other way. I mean, people like, these 14-year-olds on TikTok have figured it out. So I don't know why we can't figure it out ourselves also.
Um, Thanks, Kathleen. You and your first post Sundance Substack article. Has the second one come out yet?
Yeah, I
Okay.
published it yesterday.
Okay, great. I haven't seen it yet. But in the first one, at the end of it, you shared some thoughts on ways that filmmakers can get attention for themselves in this, a culture where it's so hard to get eyeball
Yeah.
attention.
So one of the things I'm really interested in my Substack and why I started it is that I know so many wonderful programmers, producers, directors, and I'm having all these conversations like one-on-one. So to the point of like community, I'm really interested in having these conversations in public as much as possible. And for my part one on Sundance, I wanted to really look at the Sundance Festival and its place for documentaries in the overall film ecosystem. Because right now, I think Sundance is, well, it definitely is at a turning point for a number of reasons. They have a lot less money than they used to, and that's both because of brands and sponsors not supporting the festival as much. Um, and then, I mean, I guess on the philanthropy side, I don't really have any inside information, but things to note, like Sundance was going to break ground on their own theater in Park City, and then like that didn't happen. They've had all this turmoil with their leadership. Um, and now they're basically gonna leave Park City and sort of reformulate the entire festival. So it's really at this inflection point, as is the doc community, as is the fiction community. It's just our whole ecosystem is like basically not functional. Um, and so I was trying to ask myself, what is the value of the Sundance Film Festival for filmmakers, specifically documentary filmmakers? And the number one thing, which it already does, is it's a platform to get eyeballs and awareness about our film, right? If you're lucky enough to get your film into Sundance, people are going to hear about it. That's ultimately why you want your film in Sundance, right? So, is there a way that Sundance and all film festivals can be more focused on the goal of attention, not just for individual films, but for themselves? Because one of the things I always ask myself with film festivals is like, what is the point of all this? And different film festivals have different goals. And when you talk to programmers, and I actually have a piece next week coming out with Tom Powers where I asked him about this. Like, what is the goal of your film festival? What are you programming for? And they think programmers think so much about this,
Working camp?
and certain filmmakers and certain festivals like Doc NYC, they have a huge program. Like New York Film Festival, they really choose work that challenges audiences because it's in New York and audiences will show up for more like artistic documentaries. And then, but Sundance is the king of all festivals. It's in January. It sets the agenda for the year. So, how can we ask Sundance, since it's at this inflection point, to work more closely with filmmakers to get as much attention as possible for our films and for Sundance? Because I met this woman to the TikTok point who runs a really successful TikTok channel. And she said that the people who work with her, who are all Gen Z, she was born in 1995, which I don't know about this crew, but I'm definitely a lot older than that. She's like, we all love feature films, feature documentaries, and my whole team wanted to come with me to Sundance, but it's too expensive. Getting into screenings is impossible. So they didn't come. She's like, imagine if they would have come, all the content they would have produced about Sundance on TikTok, you know? So I just feel like, can we more strategically work in partnership with film festivals to open the doors, to bring in younger audiences, make it more accessible? If the ticketing system at Sundance was just easier to use, it would be more accessible. I mean, like, these are not huge asks. And then for filmmakers to be in conversation with the festival, like, who needs to be in that room, right? Like there's press passes, but people have press badges, but strategically, who is your key audience? Like I wrote about this film called New Wave, by Elizabeth I that I highly recommend. It's an amazing documentary. And like nobody talks about it in doc. She didn't get on the big festivals or into the big lists, but it's honestly one of my favorite docs of the year. And it's about she's Vietnamese American, well, Chinese Vietnamese American, and it's the story of this subculture that she grew up with in the Vietnamese community in LA called New Wave. So essentially, like she has this incredibly passionate built-in audience for her film. And when I posted about it on my Instagram that I wrote about it, I've never got so much engagement on an Instagram post. So just to use that film as an example, say I'm any film festival, Sundance, whatever, I have this film coming that the Vietnamese community is going to be super excited about. Let's make sure that we're reaching out to the constituency that's most passionate so they know about the film, and then you start growing from there. Because then if you're bringing in a new community that doesn't normally go into to a film festival because they're excited about this one film, guess what? They're probably going to be like, "Oh wait, there's other stuff I want to see here. This is cool." Like, let's try to be more strategic about audience because, I used to run op docs, and this was always my pitch to filmmakers because op docs doesn't have a lot of money. I'd be like, "Look, no, we can't give you a lot of money, but you're going to be on the New York Times." And the thing that I learned from that is the only thing filmmakers care about more than money is audience. So like let's just use let's use film festivals to build audience because once you have that core constituency, you can say to potential buyers like, "Look, I already have this many views or this many impressions on my social media." And then it sort of builds from there. So that was like my suggestion, my humble suggestion to Sundance and other film festivals is like, let's work together to just get more attention and energy around each specific film and around the festivals as a whole to just make them more valuable.
You brought up a really interesting point, which is that they were dying to go to Sundance and they couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
My understanding is that the ticket package, a 10 movie ticket package was going for $900.
Yeah.
And even then, you couldn't even get into some of the showings.
Mhm.
Individual tickets were $90. Um, you know, I understand they have to survive and all that, but something is off in terms of, being able to build that kind of audience. I think that,
But can I just say one thing
yeah,
about that, Doug, that I
absolutely,
think is
sure.
really important? This goes back to my point is what is the goal of a film festival? If the goal of the Sundance Film Festival is to sell movies, then they can charge those prices because it's they want buyers to come, people who have expense accounts. If the goal of the festival is to get industry to come to buy films, make it expensive. But there's no market anymore for films at Sundance, even on the fiction side. So that having those kind of prices, you're then excluding more of a mass audience. So that's what I mean about we need to have these conversations at festivals like, what's your goal? Why are you doing this?
Right. So if they're moving, and let's say Sundance, and all I'm reading about is like, is Sundance not necessarily going to survive, but is their influence going to be diminished by moving to Cincinnati or Boulder or Salt Lake or wherever? Uh, what does that mean in terms of the festival ecosystem? I mean, buyers, press, critics, they all rely on Sundance to be a filter and a curator for what is like, they don't have the time to watch everything, so it's like relying on them to point out the biggest, most important films of documentaries of the year. Um, is that going to be a good thing, maybe, that they don't have that role moving forward? Um, Yabo, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I don't know if I think we're a little maybe a little bit off topic, but I think that depends on it's really about the time of the year. I don't think Sundance's power is going to diminish um depending on its geographical location. I think changing the time of the year would be the most impact if they were planning to do that. I don't think that that's on the table because, you know, if Sundance, I mean, obviously the Sundance programming is incredible, but they also have first access to a lot of projects, and then other projects, festivals don't have access to them because they've already premiered at Sundance, or and also the idea that people always want something that's new and shiny is also something that like is holding back other festivals. But um, I think the structure of film festivals being a feeder for sales is probably more the topic of the question, like if that's hurtful or harmful for filmmakers. And it's just it's a numbers game. I think if we get to the question of how many outlets are there, how many films are being made, and then where is the audience? I think audience is marketing and audience building are the areas that we as a community need to be focusing a lot more of our energy on.
Yeah. Well, this is for both of you. Do we need to just accept the fact that our films are going to get out less widely, that we need to like focus on who the niche audience for the film is and focus on reaching them? Or is there still some hope that how else can we get beyond our target audiences and into,
I mean, here's the thing, like in general, we want to play on the human connection, human experience. Like everyone in theory should could have some relationship to a project. I think it's really hard speaking, as a person of color to like want to, how do I say this? To think about the idea of like um the new wave starting in Vietnamese communities and then having the opportunity to blossom in a wider audience. Like obviously we want the Vietnamese community to watch it. And as a non-Vietnamese person, like I love that film. It's a great film. It doesn't really matter that if you're Vietnamese or not. But like because of racism in general, people aren't gonna be as interested in watching that kind of film. So it's difficult to say like, is it just about finding a niche audience and then how do we expand that audience to greater numbers? Because there's other social things at play.
I mean, I definitely agree with that, but I just want to point out to the niche audience thing. That's why like music documentaries are so successful. Like the Annie DeFranco doc is an example. Like a lot of her fans were really helpful in supporting that film. They volunteered to help with screenings. I think that when you're making a film, you always have to ask yourself, who is going to be the audience for this, right? Like, you don't make a film about like, I'm not going to make a film about my son's stuffy collection because like I don't think anyone cares about that, right? So like when you're thinking about what your film is about and who it's going to reach, if it's a law thing, it's law students or whoever that constituency is. It's just in terms of like starting with like the low hanging fruit of who's going to care about your movie. And then it's like the network effect. Once you have, as a filmmaker, an idea of where your film can be, then those are the people that from the beginning will be interested in helping to support you. And then you can grow it from there. Um, because what I'm seeing, like I'm really interested in films that like didn't get like big distribution deals, but have still been like getting it out there on their own. Like the Eno film, like Maya and the Wave. Like these are films where there's people who are just naturally going to be interested in them because of the topic, but like it could also be for a general audience. So that's really the strategy that I think is important when from the sort of the baseline of developing your movie because otherwise um if you start thinking about it once the film is already done you're you could have potentially sort of created already an appetite for it. On the flip side, it kind of kills me to say all of this because filmmakers should just make films, right? Like it's like to ask someone who's an incredible director to also be like a community and impact producer, like that is insane, and I just want to name that. Um, but but I mean, what are the role of distributors at the end of the day, right? Like this is something else I was like thinking about and I wrote about. Like, why do we like what are they there for? Okay, well, they exist because they're an entity that knows how to take a film and bring it to audiences, whether that is, through theaters or through a streaming service. Like it's a professional group of people who know what they're doing to get press and audience to pay to see a movie. And where we are right now is like those things don't aren't really accessible and they themselves like aren't doing well. So there needs to be a new playbook. There needs to be new ways of distributing that can go to a filmmaker and make some arrangement so that they don't have to start from scratch. Because I think all these projects starting from scratch to build their impact and distribution plan is like complete insanity.
I just think it's hard for us to talk about like finding new ways when the current way that exists is what needs to be like investigated and reshaped. Because like I don't know, I mean, I don't know if there's a new way that's gonna be able to compete with Netflix in terms of the eyeballs or in terms of the budget.
No, I agree with you. I totally agree with you. I just think that the number of slots there are on Netflix or HBO is so small, right? And they're not going to increase. So what are we going to do?
And they're looking for certain kinds of documentaries, true crime, sports, celebrity driven. Where's the place for character-driven stories or political documentaries, social issue documentaries, if they're not interested. Which leads me to ask if the documentary feature is on life support, should we be focusing more on shorts? Is there a way to get, short films out? Kathleen, you're probably the perfect person to ask about this. Where, how is, particularly if you're doing some sort of impact campaign and doing virtual screenings and community screenings, does it make more sense to have a short film than a feature when you can't, it's so hard to get into festivals and get features out there?
I think that's a complicated question because it depends on what your goals are. If your goal is to make a short film and have that be something that is going to make money so you can pay your rent and do all the pay all the normal bills one needs to pay. Don't make a short film. There's no money in short films. Um, they're just as expensive as a feature even sometimes. Like short films can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to make. Or even 100,000 or even 50. I mean, when I did OpDocs, we had special funding through MacArthur and other entities, chicken and egg. But even the monies that I was able to find to support short filmmakers, like it's still not a money-making thing or even a break-even thing. So no, don't make a short if you're expecting to make money. Do make a short if you want to create something that is a calling card about your skills as a filmmaker. Another business model that I know a few filmmakers have is they do work for advertising and brands, and then they make New York Times op docs and they use those as like, look, I'm on the New York Times, and maybe my film won an award. So it sort of increases your credibility to clients who do have real money to pay you to make branded or ad content.
Folks, I mentioned at the beginning that we were going to open this up as a kind of forum, and bring people up on camera who have, I I looked at the list of people who registered for this. There are many, many, many accomplished filmmakers, experienced filmmakers, and industry thought leaders attending here today. So I know you guys have a lot to say. So use the raised hand function and we'll start calling on you. And as you're lining up, I'll just throw one thing out, which is, if I were a young person starting out today, Kathleen, you said don't go into shorts if you expect to make money. I would say don't go into feature length docs if you want to make money. That's not the purpose of it. And if I were doing it, I'd probably be on TikTok or start a YouTube channel, do serialized content. That's where a lot of the audience is these days. I mean, COVID hit the theater, it hit, people, the limited audience there was to begin with people who are paying money to go see documentaries in theaters. The older audience hasn't come back to see films post-COVID. So, am I, is this radical thinking to think that we should just not be using the feature doc anymore as a model for what, even if we're looking to break in as an artist, and use it as a means of expressing, telling stories artistically? What do you guys think? What would you do if you were starting out again, given where we are right now?
I think what we have to be smarter about is being, if you're in this to be a business, we need to think more like business people and acknowledge that like taking 10 years to make something that you're only going to get a certain amount of money, $300,000 back, like on average, like we all want that like 5 million on Netflix like situation, right? We all, that, of course, that's the dream. That's what made it feel like it was possible. But if we look at the numbers, which exist somewhere, and we average out like how much time how are we spending on making docs versus how much money we're spending making them, and how much money we're making back. There may be ways that we can look at like the business part of it and have that money work better for us. And that I think is one of the things that folks on TikTok have figured out. Spend $0 making something, make a lot of money on the other end, and spend, 10 minutes or like a day, making something and see what comes back. But I think in the time that we're in, like despite how frustrated I might seem, I think that like in the time that we're in with it politically and also with the industry in these question marks, it's really important for artists to still persevere and to, of course, respond in this moment as it feels comfortable to you, but also to go in your cave and make the stuff that you want to make in your cave, because hopefully it'll get figured out sooner than later. And if it doesn't, don't hold your breath, just put it out, Like I think one of the things that's most important about growing as an artist is I can never remember this word. Is the word, it starts with a P, the word for continuing to make things. Um,
Perpetuate.
Sustainable.
Prolific. Prolific
Prolific.
engineer.
Thank you. Being prolific, I feel like is one of the key elements of building a career in the documentary industry. Um, even if they're small, nobody sees it, whatever, it's just the art of practice. You're just making, you're perfecting your tools. And so even in this like challenging time right now, I would encourage folks to find ways to make things within your means that can continue to work on your tool, continue to work on your expression, can build your audience in the meantime. Building audience right now is super important. And like hopefully in a couple of years, hopefully, you'll be in a better the industry and the world will be in a better place um that's more nurturing for the work that we're trying to do.
And Kathleen, I throw it out to you. What would you starting anew, and you can't intern for Alex Gibney anymore because he's selling his company. So what would you do to, grow as an artist to get, to do the things that we would in past years go into making a doc feature for?
So I think it's interesting to look at how other industries are addressing sort of the same situation. Um, journalism, I wanted to be like a print reporter. That was my goal when I was in college. And even all those years ago, print was contracting and I was not really accepted. I tried to get an internship at the AP. I didn't get it. And everyone there was like so rude. I was just like, I don't want to be part of this. Um, and then I found documentary and I was like, oh, I love this. It was an exciting time. But what happened with journalism already and what is happening now in documentary are similar in that the traditional institutions that supported documentary are in fiscal crisis. As a result, there aren't as many opportunities for filmmakers. So, and we of course see that with print journalism. So, what have print journalists done? They've started Substacks. Um, they write for corporations or publicity to make money, and then they write books. There are nonprofits like ProPublica or the Marshall Project that have deep pockets to do meaningful investigative journalism. Um, the whole, like the opportunities have gotten sort of more dispersed in different ways. I mean, so I think for documentary film, if I were starting now, I would to the point of making things, you know, in a way that is scrappy, and then I would build a following on YouTube. I wouldn't bother interning for anyone. I would just start making my own things, which is great because then you're going to get good. You're going to learn all the skills, how to tell stories, how to shoot, how to edit. And then I would just start distributing it myself to build an audience. Um, and then I would think about making money. I wouldn't assume that Netflix or HBO is going to come knocking on my door. I would try to get work through more commercial means. Um, and then really see the making whatever I want as something to build towards. But in the short term, yeah, I would definitely try to get more clients and do the ad side. I I think there's some people on this call that also have experience doing that, having a sort of diverse slate of not only projects, but like types of projects and income streams. So if anyone wants to speak up to having done that, I think that could be interesting for
Yes,
the.
please do. By the way, I'll just add, I would shoot on nothing but an iPhone at this point if I were coming up, and I would, uh, I would use the model of Sean Baker, who did Tangerine, one of his early movies, on an iPhone, and it was, it was the springboard for his career. And now he's got Honora and an amazing career.
Yeah,
But
Soderbergh was shooting on an iPhone years ago.
Yeah. Okay, folks, we're going to start calling on those who've raised their hands. This is not, you can ask a question of our guests, but really, honestly, this is for you to share your own thoughts and ideas that this discussion has brought up as well. So, Suzanne?
Hi. I was able to make several documentaries in New Orleans when I worked by myself. I literally would just go on my own and film. But when I got to New York, unfortunately, after Katrina, no one would give me any work because then I'd have to make these documentaries that, for instance, HBO wanted to make. And I did make some and they're really awful. So let's just go there. But I feel like there's a major disconnect between people and these tech companies we're finding out more and more are not nice. They're not inclusive. They don't care about people. And some of these film festivals have become major corporations that are really more beholden to their sponsors. There's some incredible festivals, but they're not Sundance, for instance. There's smaller ones that give you attention and help you. And that's why people are attacking TikTok, because TikTok bypasses the gatekeepers. And we should talk about the fact that these companies like Netflix, for instance, are corporations and they're tech firms that have actually, people have gotten distribution from them, but then that distribution deal has killed anything, in terms of anyone seeing the product. Just now, Netflix just killed the Prince documentary. I understand that the family didn't want it, and I do respect that. But then there's a filmmaker that spent years and did all the right things, and now his documentary, no one will see it. So that's my take. Thank you.
Thank you. Tiffany, can you come on camera?
Yeah, thanks. Really appreciate this. And I agree with a lot of what I've heard. What I was going to say too is a couple of things. One is that I get questions on this stuff a lot. I've worked in like the production side of looking for the funds and also the distribution side, working with festivals. And another thing I would kind of keep in mind too is a lot of these festivals are super broke in the same way. I mean, the Human Rights Festival went away. I was just talking last week with some friends, and I didn't realize that they were volunteering their time to keep a festival afloat. And it's a pretty high level festival. And even when I've worked with festivals personally, there are countless people working for very little money. And that's even at the high level. And I worked with the crews that were like going around to the Sundance and Mountain Film and South by Southwest and all that. And those people are really ground down too. And they're doing a lot of work and often not getting paid in the kind of like the bigger world of like festivals that aren't at that level. So I just kind of like say that partially for people to understand that's a tough world too. And I know the demands on those people are often kind of, I think, unrealistic. And the other thing I was going to say, because I've worked with a lot of development, and worked on like Oculus VR for Good stuff that got distributed and worked on Golden Globe nominated films and things like that, and a lot of independent documentaries. But if there's one thing I've consistently seen is that it takes money to make money on these films. Where I have seen people be able to get money is because they're working with a nonprofit or they're working with a big studio or there's a development team that is paid a salary, and they have money to wine and dine people and stuff, and I've also, done it on scrapper basis, but, partnered with Dallas Casa or whatever to, use their team of people so that we could go to pitches and things like that. But I get asked on the regular so often by people, it's like they want to hop on a call and have some magic bullet to get to money. And I hate to say it, but it's hiring people, like you need to pay people to do development. It's a lot of work and it's expensive, and taking people out to wine and dine them 5 or 6 times so that they have a rapport with you. I've seen that work over and over again, but I feel like there's a lot of people in this space right now that think that they can just talk to somebody and pro bono money's going to fall from the sky. And that's just my 2 cents on that. I'm sorry, but it's expensive to find money.
Yeah. Thanks, Tiffany. Antoine, coming in from Beirut. Good to see you.
Hi, good to see you. Very interesting conversation, and I like what Kathleen said about what's looking at other industries and what they're doing in other industries. I'm new in the documentary world, in the documentary industry. I'm coming from a business background, and when you look at the way startups, because making a documentary film feels very much like a startup. What they're looking at is what is the potential market you're going after and what the audience is. So if there's a potential market that you put a number on because you looked at different nonprofit, which kind of media you can reach out to, etc., and you estimate it to be worth, let's say, $50,000, then you have to make sure that the film that you're going to develop also is within the budget of the kind of market you're going to be reaching out to. So I think that that's also an interesting exercise to be done right from the start, to have some ideas if what kind of fundings you need and if that funding is in accordance with the kind of market you're going to be targeting. I finished it's my first short. It's on the displaced, the Lebanese that had to flee their homes during the last war between Hezbollah and Israel. And I started working on the outreach, so academia, nonprofit, media, think tanks, research centers, etc., and trying to find my way through there. And sometimes it's hard to do, and sometimes you need some kind of contacts. OpDocs actually is one of my target audience. So if you know anyone that I could reach out to there, I would really appreciate. But it's really about there's some people were talking about, silver bullets and things like that. Even in startups, there's no silver bullets. You always hear about the success stories, the ones that got like at Sundance, the one that got bought for 5 million. But how many others don't make it? So I think it's important to put things into perspective and to try to mitigate the risk of the project you have with the reality of the market right from the start. I think it's a good reality check. So that's my
Thanks, Antoine.
thoughts
I'll just
about it.
add,
Thanks.
Antoine showed his piece a few weeks ago at a work in progress session here. It's great, and this brings home how universal displacement is. We now see, if folks in your film, in light of the LA fires and all the people we know who've been suddenly displaced, and it's really universal. And hope there's a place for it as a
Thanks.
short. Kai, welcome.
Good morning, D Word. How's everyone doing? I just wanted to make a comment on because Catherine mentioned that a lot of people that want to attend Sundance can't afford it. And I just want to say for any filmmaker, and I'm talking about myself, including the cheapest ticket into the Sundance Film Festival is to become a volunteer. I've done it a gazillion times. I get I get more vouchers to screenings and just being in the room than I can attend when I do volunteer. Of course, you're going to pay your own ticket in terms of travel and food, but you're going to do that anyway if if you're going to if you're going to be an attendee anyway. So that's one way of getting in and being in the room. The thing is that when you're in these rooms, you got to know how to work the room. So I've volunteered at Sundance as an events coordinator, and I was at all the producers' brunches and everything, like, at rubbing shoulders with the button pushers they send you everybody's email from the CEO of Netflix to HBO. You got to know how to work those rooms. And I've seen every single film, even the ones that are nominated now, like Porcelain War, Death by Numbers. I've seen all of these films just by being a volunteer at the film festival. And the one thing I want to say to you, Doug, is you mentioned shooting on the iPhone. I've done that plenty of times. It's not a bad idea. However, it doesn't meet the criteria of a lot of these film festivals and streaming networks. I just wanted to put that out there.
Maybe not. Well, they're shooting in 4K now, the iPhones, and I would anyway. That's a discussion for another day. By the way, we're about to open a mobile phone topic on the D word. We have a cinematography topic among our 40 discussion topics on the D word, but we're about to open one on shooting with mobile phones. So stay tuned.
Absolutely.
Amy, hello.
Sorry, I had to do my audio. I have two things that are kind of related. My my bigger thing that I just want to bring up and throw it out there, and people can groan and moan a little bit if they want, but I when I think of the whole model that is, broken, and we've all talked about it a million times, and what happens in distribution and what gets picked for film festivals and what gets pushed out, I have to say, like, there is not a lot of discussion about what gets funded to begin with. And because I sort of work, I guess, in a space that is not just impact, not just important subjects, not just saving the world. And I want to make those films. I have a very long list of my favorite documentaries and my favorite documentarians. And I watched lots of, really hardcore. Frontline is one of my favorite shows in the world, but it's almost impossible to get something more subtle or something that has humor. It's almost impossible to get it funded because it doesn't seem important. And when you're going up against, decks that have impact producers and, impact plans, and I actually did an impact plan for my last film, and it didn't do any good. And because I think I would prefer to be more subtle with the message behind the film and more upfront with the art. So I just want to throw that out there, because if you don't get funding, you don't get pushed up the funnel. And that affects where you end up on film festivals, and that affects your distribution opportunities. It all starts with who gives you the money to begin with, and who's helping you, and who's giving you advice, and who's making sure their money is well spent. And then that goes back to something, Kathleen, that you said. And Kathleen, I owe her, because she's right. If you want to be on UpDocs, do it for the audience. It was really one of the highlights of my career. I did a stupid, funny short film that she took, and it was really just being on the New York Times was everything. It didn't matter the money. It really doesn't matter. But I know that model of like the niche market, but the same thing has happened in advertising. There's a little bit of a parallel, kind of the same parallel with that you were talking about with journalism and the way things have changed. And now what happens with advertising is everything is about engagement. It's not about persuasion. And it comes down to like algorithms. And so, for example, dog food. So if somebody wants to sell dog food, they go out and they find all the people that have dogs. And what used to happen in the old days, and this goes back to audience, is somebody would make a dog food commercial that was so beautiful and wonderful that even the people who don't have dogs would get a dog and buy the food. So I sort of wonder, I know the niche audience thing works, but when you want to make something that's more broad and appeal to a broad audience, how do you get it funded? Because if it doesn't have a specific policy change or impact, and you're not saving somebody from something, and then how do you get it out there if there's no obvious niche audience to start with?
Yeah. You bring up such a great point, Amy, which is, if you're just telling a wonderful story, it's how do you get and you have no niche audience. Like when I fill out a form for, like, say, a pitch market, and they ask who's your audience, I go like anybody with a beating heart, and doesn't help, but I mean, it's true. And it's a pretty big niche audience, I guess. But yeah,
I don't know. I feel like actually, Amy, and I was also thinking of you when I said about people making money through diverse income streams, because I know you've done both docs and worked on the advertising side. But I mean, having spoken with buyers at different places, both on the commercial side, but also in public media, I actually think now, because there is so much intense focus around political stories, this might be your moment. I mean, I don't know. I think buyers really want human stories that can break through to everybody and don't have a particular sort of point of view or whatever you want to call it. So I don't know. I don't know. But I actually would be very interested to see how like how buyers would react to things that are truly just great human stories because I hear they don't want politics, so maybe that actually is going to be a plus.
Yeah, I don't know. I did end up I just finished Happy Campers, and it did really well. I mean, it premiered at Doc NYC, God bless them. They have really great audiences. And I did my own theatrical, including while posting, which I can tell you how to do it in New York. If anybody wants to know, reach out to me. Um, um, and I have a nice distributor, but I went broke doing it because other than Catapult, no one would fund it because it was a post 2020 environment, and a lot of my people were white working class. Everyone wrongly assumed that they were Trumpers, and yeah, so it was just really hard, and they're lovely people, and it's a great story about community, and yeah, so I don't know what I'm going to do next. I have an idea for something that is not attached to any social issue, but I don't want to waste 3.5 years of my life going back and applying.
Thanks.
I can't go through those applications again.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks for sharing. Simon, can you get on camera? Oh, you are on camera.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
It's just very still.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for all the insights. I'm interested to know what role do you think independent production companies can play for distribution? Indies, independent production companies. What role can they play in distribution these days? Do you think?
I think independent production companies are looking for distribution for their films. I don't know that they're not distributors. Is there anything more, can you be a little more specific about what you mean?
No, I thought, what role can they play in getting our films out? I mean, any insights on that?
Well,
I'm relatively new.
I think one of the complaints that folks have had, bouncing off of Carrie Putnam's research, is about there being too many places in a certain way to find films. So it's challenging for us on one hand to want to be like, let's make more places where our films can be seen because we have so many of them. On the other hand, the audiences are saying, whoa, I'm overwhelmed. I don't even know where to go. So I don't think the answer is for them to, I mean, I don't know, but I don't know if the answer is to create like, new other things. But maybe production companies, I don't know. I wonder how many of them are speaking out or, having pushback with the buyers about the challenges of the industry because, they are the ones that are making the work. And so they have a voice. I don't know if that's something that they feel like they have the opportunity or I don't know, the freedom to say or do anything about that yet, or if that's like a group conversation. It would be interesting to find out.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Simon. Michael.
Hi, thanks. So I'm Michael Azevedo. I produce and host a podcast called Making Media Now. That's sponsored by Filmmakers Collaborative. If anybody has a film that's close to getting out in the world and they'd like to chat with me about it, I'd love to talk to you about that too, to perhaps help you find an audience. But one of the things I was curious about was if anybody has been considering any methods of engaging with social media platforms like TikTok and YouTube earlier in the process, almost during the making of. There's always a big interest for like behind the scenes info and interviews and so forth, which always seem to come out when the film is already out or the TV series. And they do really impressive numbers like on places like YouTube. But I think this is kind of in line with what Kathleen had mentioned, kind of a multi-prong approach. Not only multiple sort of streams of income, but thinking of multiple avenues of exposure as the film is in different places in production. So I don't know if anybody is thinking of that or has done that. I feel like every week I'm reading about some piece of, I'm just going to call it content, that has leapfrogged all of the gatekeepers and the really tight process to find some crazy large audience via one of the streaming platforms. And they are, they're making money in the sense that they're getting, advertiser dollars, and maybe those advertiser dollars get poured right back into the production of the fuller film or a different film. So,
Kathleen, you in your first Sundance piece, didn't you touch a little bit on that? Or
So on reaching out to like YouTube and TikTok.
putting clips up on social media? Or am I confusing it with
Well,
another post?
I mean, I think those are all great ideas. And now that I'm on Substack, they really want to do more video. And I met with someone in marketing there just to like ask some questions about how the whole thing worked. And I thought this was interesting because she was like, we would love for you, to have films on TikTok. I'm sorry, we would love for you to have films on Substack. And I was like, yeah, I know. I think it could be a great ecosystem for films, but films are a lot more expensive to make than to write something. But they don't offer any funding for creators. If you're going to do something cool, they'll help you promote it. But that's the thing with, that's the whole model of the creator economy that YouTube and TikTok and Substack, what they all rely on is us putting our stuff on there and it not costing them anything. And then they figure out a business model on top of it. Um, and once you have stuff on the platforms and you have some audience, I mean, my Substack audience is relatively very small, but they were still nice enough to like take a call with me. The platforms will give you advice and maybe even help you to promote your stuff on their platform. And I also think, and just sort of related to that idea, as we're conceiving of our projects and we have to also think about what is our end goal. If your end goal truly is to have your film on Netflix, then you should research what does well on Netflix. What are they buying? What are the formats? All that stuff. And on the flip side, if your goal is to be on YouTube, do the same research because whatever you make, if you're not thinking about its ultimate destination, there could be a mismatch, right? Like if you're making a documentary that is going to be a short, you're going to think about OpDocs, you're going to think about the New Yorker, but at the same time, maybe there's something more creative to do into making something that's maybe feature length, but on YouTube, broken up into episodes. I think there's a lot of opportunity to do things differently that will work on different platforms. And that can be something else when you're early in your process, you can think about. Like if you're making something, you're like, Netflix is never going to buy this for whatever reason, this isn't a commercial project. Okay, well then think about the places where you can post things yourself and what are the forms of that content that best work on those platforms.
Great.
Doug, this is the voice of God, Erica here. Just to let you know that we have about 10 minutes left. We have about 9 people waiting. I know Jeannie Finlay has been wanting to say something. She wasn't able to raise her hand. Can
Okay.
you bring her on now?
And Kathleen, are you willing to stay a little bit longer than our 1:30 cutoff, or do you have something else? Can you hang in for a few extra minutes?
Yeah, I can hang for a few extra minutes.
Okay,
Yeah.
Kathleen. Yeah, sure, Jeannie, absolutely.
Hi everyone. I just wanted to speak because I was thinking about what I would do differently. We just took your fat friend to cinemas around the world, and I was sort of getting sassy in the chat. I don't call this DIY distribution. I'm not selling bootleg DVDs out of my car boot. This is radical creative distribution. And as an artist who sort of infiltrated the documentary scene, I always think about I always think about all of the work is the work. So the flyer, the Q&A, the social media, it's all the film. So I'm thinking all the time about what are the different ways that my storytelling can carry on when the credits have rolled, and thinking about building the assets. Like, so doing a photo shoot with the person that my film is about to make sure that those pictures get featured. They're good. I have good assets. Um, I'm privileged in that I live in the UK and there is still some funding for film, but in terms of our distribution, we couldn't raise money from any of the traditional routes, so we did watch parties on Kinema, and that enabled us to, first of all, Oscar qualify, release in the US, and then we took it to 120 cinemas in the UK, and we beat all of the distributors that turned our film down, which was very satisfying. But anyway, I am writing a case study at the moment. I think a lot of case studies are rubbish. And I don't mean that in an arrogant way. I just think that they're not very fun. So I've been working with a creative agency to pull apart what a case study can be. And as soon as that's done, I'm going to launch it through my website because I'm worried about tech bros owning platforms. So the best way for me to do that is through my own website. So I'd encourage everyone to sign up. But the thing that I'm going to do, I'm making my 10th feature at the moment, and I have given up on the idea of Netflix. I'm not making films for streamers. I mean, never say never, but I think the stories I want to tell, quiet voices, people far from the spotlight, are just not algorithm friendly. However, they are audience friendly because the act of putting a small voice in front of a cinema is an act of amplification, and I trust the audience. So the thing that I will do is not waste my time on pursuing trying to get distribution. I'm going to I'm going to use radical creative distribution as my first choice.
Great.
And that feels liberating and creative and exciting in a way that sitting at a film festival and waiting for the terrible, insulting offers to come in, it's just like you feel like you're wasting your life. And I could be just like, I'm good friends with Gary Huswit, and what he did with Eno was amazing. And it's distribution first. It's in our hands. And, we chat, and, there's a filmmaking community here. So that would be the things I would do first. Whether that fits for every film, I don't know, but I've learned so much from doing this on a bunch of features now.
Thank you, Jeannie. Beautifully said. And the thing that you and Gary share is you're brilliant filmmakers. You make great films, and it all starts with having a great film. You can do all the marketing and clever stuff around it, but it all comes down to the film. And congrats, you just do great work. So thanks for sharing that. That was
Thanks for
inspiring.
having this conversation. Yeah, go to my website, jeanniefinlay.com, and sign up for my case study.
All right. Well done. Thank you. Nancy Kelly, can you come on camera?
Yes, hi. So I have a film that I made with my husband and filmmaking partner, Kenji Yamamoto, called The Dreamers and I, and it's premiering at CineQuest next month. And I have done all kinds of distribution, from having distributors to New Day Films. And with this one, it's about a hacker house in Silicon Valley, and I have a sense that the audience is people who never leave their computer screens. And I am kind of stumped about how do I start to reach out to those people and get them to come and see the film, which is premiering in Silicon Valley. And this isn't the time for people to send me to talk about ideas, but I really would love to hear from anybody who might have even a one sentence thought about that.
Nancy, put the request in the chat,
I
and
will.
and your contact info.
Yeah.
So if anybody
Okay.
has a thought on that, that's the place for them to share it.
All right. Great.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank you for putting that out there. Sandy.
Hi, everyone. So I do have an idea. I did have my own film at Sundance back in 2000. And currently I'm showing it at universities. But my idea is to suggest doc filmmakers connect with media literacy people. Now, media literacy is a movement that started in Australia and the United Kingdom, and then North America. So who are the people actively practicing media literacy today? Are there organizations you can look up to get support for your film? Are there media literacy programs in the schools? It's like, because one of the other institutions in crisis right now in our massively dumbed down society is the whole educational system. And so there still are teachers pushing back against censorship and not allowed to do DEI and on and on. So how can we work with those people to bring documentaries into the schools at all grade levels, right up to universities, and show our films, because so many films now are needed to really help as change makers, like to really raise a consciousness of especially the younger generations who apparently are not showing up now at the film festivals, but how do we engage them and get them excited about the important human stories that we're all telling? And that includes the current stories, the newer stories that need to be told, but also some of our historic stories that can be relaunched to really indicate to all generations that our stories are so important to motivate all of us to create a better world. And so media literacy, so check that out as a connecting point about ways to get distribution into our educational systems. So that's what I'd like to offer today. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandy. Thanks for putting that out there. And again, put your, put your thoughts, contact info. If anybody wants to follow up, put that in the chat.
And guys, I just want to highlight, I'm about to put in the chat the URL for my Substack and my email. So email me if you want a free subscription.
Ooh, ah. Thanks, Kathleen. Alex.
Okay, just a couple of observations on 3 points. The golden age, documentaries advocacy, and niche audiences. First of all, speaking about the golden age, I was working for some filmmakers in the late 90s who won an Oscar, and they couldn't get funding for their next film. This is a film that went to HBO, won an Oscar. They still couldn't get funding for their next film, so they funded it themselves. Unfortunately, luckily they had a revenue stream. That film also went to HBO, got shortlisted for an Oscar nomination, and yet they still couldn't get funding for any of their other projects. So people talk about the golden age. I don't know if there ever really was a golden age. I think that's like saying the 1950s were a wonderful time in the United States. It wasn't. Second thing about advocacy, something I posted in the chat earlier was that Josh Braun at DC Docs last summer talked about films that had strong advocacy campaigns, audience outreach tied to them. Distributors, those films, those kinds of advocacy campaigns were having a chilling effect on distributor interest. And it was very, very strongly implied, and I'll just talk about the elephant in the room here. It was very strongly implied that it was because of, MAGAs having, smear campaigns and boycotts of streamers or distributors who might carry those films that are advocating for any one particular issue. And so streamers were getting a little gun shy about that, sometimes literally gun shy. So I question whether advocacy is really something that as documentary filmmakers we should be thinking about. And does it really work? I mean, I hate to say this, and this is going to be probably not a very popular opinion, but did Bowling for Columbine really change gun policy in America? There are more school shootings after Bowling for Columbine than there were before. And An Inconvenient Truth. They had two films on environmentalism. Did it help? No, it didn't. We're actually worse off environmentally than we were before those two films. Didn't help, didn't do a lick of good. So I really have to wonder if we should rethink what our role as documentary filmmakers are. I don't think we're going to change the world. And that's a really cynical opinion, but I think the evidence kind of bears out that a lot of this is can be characterized in some ways as good money after bad. And that's a really, really cynical opinion. I know it's not going to be popular. I don't like that I've come to that opinion, because I very much felt that way, that, that's why I got into this business, is because I thought you could change the world. Or I thought you could at least make an impact in some people's lives. But I think by and large, we're deluding ourselves if we think that we have that much power. We don't. Last thing on niche audiences. I want to point out that it takes the same amount of time, effort, and money to make a film that appeals to a small niche audience as it does to make a film that appeals to a broad audience. It's just economy 101. I think we're better off taking advantage of economies of scale. If our goal is to tell stories and to tell compelling stories, we should find stories that have a broad appeal, or find the part of our story, if it is about a small niche subject, that we can translate to have a more universal appeal. Because if you're an acquisitions executive, you're not looking for the film that is going to appeal to a very, very small content vertical of your subscriber base. You're looking for the film that, if you're going to advertise, if you're going to try to get more subs, you're going to want that film to appeal to as many people as possible, so that they're going to pay money monthly to consume that content. So I think we should be focusing our efforts on broadening the appeal of our films and not narrowing them. I think if we narrow that appeal, then we reduce our power as filmmakers, and we're selling ourselves short. These are all very cynical opinions, but I think I don't know. I think there's a case to be made that they're realistic opinions. Anyway, thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Thanks for sharing, Alex. Christine.
Yeah, can I just say real quick? I think that we have to be careful about what we think impact, like how we're defining what impact is and what it is to change the world. I feel like I've been in the doc business for, I don't know, 10 plus years. And from day one, I'm like, guys, this seems a little bit above our our pay grade about like how we're trying to make impact makes so much sense, and just putting so much focus and money and an emphasis on impact when it is so difficult to define and so hard to measure. So obviously always in for changing the world, but I think that the smaller worlds that we are inhabiting in our communities is the way that you can start. And also, like, I don't know. I don't know. Sorry, I lost my train of thought, but
That's okay. I totally agree, Iyabo, and I don't think all documentary filmmakers set out to change the world.
yeah, it's okay to make art, guys. It's
Yeah,
okay to just make movies because they're fun. It's okay to make
exactly.
movies that are pretty.
Exactly.
It doesn't
Thank you.
have to
Thank
always
you.
be a
Thank you.
life-changing situation.
Guys, if you come away with nothing else from this session, that was it. for me. Thank you. Yep. Christine.
Yeah, actually, one of those films that is Peter Hujar's Day, which I saw at Sundance, which is truly art. Um, so yeah, kudos to that. The other thing about impact campaigns, I come from the business world like Antoine, and I do think that filmmaking is very much like startups. I'm doing this for the first time now. And sorry, I'm just getting over the flu, but but I uh, and sorry, I'm just sort of, I'm a little cloudy. But I also think that with impact campaigns, came through corporate social responsibility. I think it's important to try to measure, to build in some kind of measurements, because that's what makes the difference. I mean, I moderated a panel on creating social impact films years ago, and one of the things, one of my panelists was from CNN, and Blackfish, that got the whales out of SeaWorld. So, Alex, I appreciate your comment about what you're saying, but I also think what would have happened with climate change, what would have happened with shootings, school shootings, if that wasn't there. But then there's the imitator effect, that you see a crime being done and then it's like, okay, now you have the password to how to do it yourself. But I do think that measuring impact is really important. So on the D word, a couple of months ago, someone talked about actual experience with something that I've been wanting to do with my film, which is about people who in LA, but also generally, who have been homeless but aren't anymore. And it was sort of it's really all of us. And now the LA fires have, emphasized that. But the idea of affiliates, the idea of branding, of a brand association with, say, my film with on a mortgage company's, probably the mortgage company's platform, or on an IKEA platform, to be able to license the parts of the content so that it makes their platforms more interesting. So it's not all about product. And so it's also an income stream for the film. And I'm just wondering, she was based in London, and I have been wanting to contact her, but I don't know who it is. But I'm just wondering what your impressions are about that. Because again, I don't come to this from, we're going to make this amazing sale, because that was the veterans. That's what you guys have been used to. So I really have come to this just from this is the reality of where we are. So how do we think differently?
Yeah, but Kathleen, either one of you want to take that one on?
I don't think anyone is going to save us but us. I think that's ultimately the answer. And especially if we're talking about brand companies, they have their own agendas that have nothing to do with our livelihoods whatsoever. And they are also, again, they're business people. So they are seeing what's going on in our industry, and they're just like, this doesn't seem like that cool of a party, even from our perspective. So I think we're just going to keep doing our own thing. I think that's what's been a trend over the last couple of years, is branded peaked for a second. We all rushed to them, and they're like, oh, actually, we don't have the interest or money to actually support all the things that you guys are trying to do.
Yeah. This is slightly not quite the answer, Christine.
Just to sort of maybe clarify. So I'm talking about like a company that say they, this is about people's homes. And so as part of their marketing budget, they would not invest in the film, but that after the film is done, they'd say, hey, we want to use some of your clips to enhance our website, so that on their homepage, it has, here's this product, but then you can also, as a user, it could be IKEA, whatever, but as a visitor to the site, it's not coming down all about product. It's about the soft messaging. So just to clarify, in case I wasn't.
Christine, my own reaction to that is, I go back to what Jeannie was saying, for us to rely on some company, some corporation, some business to be the marketers of or help us with the marketing of our film, I think to me is misplaced. I, I like the idea of seeing the marketing and that aspect of our film as fun, as creative, and as something that we can, play with, and as rather than just as a chore and as something we wish somebody else would take on so that we could go on with our careers as a filmmaker. It's empowering. I mean, I, I just hate giving power to those who don't have our own interests in mind. But that's just, my feeling about it. Anyway, we're going to move on. We have four more people. We'll try and get to them very quickly. Michael, then Elizabeth, Devin, and Peter.
Hey, everybody. There we go. Great to be in a room with kindred spirits. My most recent documentary, by all counts, is a success. You guys may know it. It's called Veselka, the rainbow on the corner at the center of the world, about the beloved Ukrainian restaurant in New York City. The movie was completed in January a year ago, and based on the timeliness of how it's about universal themes of family and community, but with a backdrop of the first year of the war in Ukraine by way of the employees and family at the restaurant. I always said to the investors, it's really important that we get this movie out as quickly as possible because we were seeing a changing sentiment in the United States politically about should we be supporting Ukraine? And the movie is not a war movie. I always say it's an antidote to war. And I said to the investors, like, look, let's be quick to pivot. And I had learned on my previous documentary that being a production company and distributor equally and be ready to wear that distributor cap is as important as being a great producer making the movie. So I went up multiple ladders at once, from festivals to applying to festivals, creating a theatrical release plan, and talking to distributors. And depending on which was kind of firing off the most fireworks, I would kind of go up that ladder quicker. And so we didn't get into Sundance. We premiered at Santa Barbara, but simultaneous, I was building a theatrical release to occur on a 2-year commemoration of the war, which was February 24th. So when we released, we had, again, by all counts in this current climate, an incredible theatrical release. We, across 3 months, were in 40 cities, and I was doing it through my own banner, Fiore Media Group. So when I started to continue to knock on doors with the various distributors, I would often say, we're kind of the Ukrainian American version of Euro Dreams of Sushi. As we all know, huge hit. People love it to this day. And it was funny because they would say, we applaud what you did theatrically. We were observing, but we don't take movies that have already done their own self-release. Now, I think it's absurd. I think instead they should have said, okay, let's run with it. But I think the secret, we all may know this, is that the companies know the theatrical is the best ad for their company. It's almost like the streaming doesn't matter to them. It's the New York Times and all the different ads that come out for the theatrical. And once I took that away from them, it was like my movie doesn't have any value anymore. And that was a very different experience from my previous documentary, Floyd Norman, An Animated Life, because that documentary got picked up by Netflix like that. I did the same model, and I did a smaller theatrical. And I think the industry has to start recognizing that, for instance, like the LA Times didn't even come to review the movie. And I have a wonderful publicist, and they said, the sense we're getting is a lot of these publications think that you're a local story. you could call Goodfellas a local story. You know, there's universal themes and everything. Just because it's set in a restaurant in New
So,
York.
so Michael, what's your takeaway then from this experience that you're going through? Because
Well,
we
I'm
have to move on, but
sure
what
I wanted to just share these sentiments with you all to give you a sense that, you know, here's some takeaway for you all. You know, based on experiences of having a successful run. I come out on Prime streaming next week. It's been a very hard mountain to climb. And I don't think the industry is receptive necessarily to people trying to carve their own path up the mountain. So take what you will from that, but I just wanted to share my experiences.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think I just want to say something, like this is a question. I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of films right now, how what happens is they're at a festival and then a theatrical distributor, Kino Lorber, Greenwich, um, Utopia, like they'll buy it and then they'll put it into a theatrical run. Depending on the film, it might be small or whatever. And then they license the film to Netflix or Amazon or whoever wants to buy it. So I just wanted to sort of understand, like, so be you're saying because you put it in theaters yourself, they then didn't want to license the film from you?
Exactly. So I won't say the company's name, but a very notable distributor basically said, we've seen what you've done, we applaud what you've done, but we don't take a movie that's already done its own theatrical. So
So
basically,
what kind of
I did the
distributor?
equivalent of a Kino Lorber or Magnolia, played at the same theaters as a lot of their big movies this year. But instead of saying, hey, this guy did what we do, let's just take the ball from him and now license it to a streamer. Instead, they just said, we don't want anything to do with your movie. The end of the year, CNN named us a top film to see, a must-see film to see. That to me is Kino's loss, Magnolia's loss. It shouldn't be that I have to now turn into a new version of Kino. Kino and Magnolia should say, hey, let's keep rebuilding this machine and model because there are movies and there are people out there that we can come together and make an even stronger machine working together. But instead, I think they looked at me as like a cog being thrown in the machine to like disrupt their machine. And I think we can all work
Yeah.
together really nicely where they go, oh, shoot, we didn't know this part could go in here and make us run even a little better. We don't have to do any more work. Mike Fiore went off and did his own theatrical, created all the advertising, did everything for us. Great. We slap our name on there and then put it out there. But instead, they took all the validation that I created myself through a theatrical and instead just said, we don't know what to do with that, or we don't want that. And I think that that's why I wanted to speak today. I think that there's a lot of great movies and people working very hard, as hard as the Kinos, Magnolias, and other outlets. And instead of saying, let's just kind of bring all these pieces together, they're going, what's this? This is different. We don't want this. So,
Well,
boy, that's
just to level set, I think your experience is super interesting and informative, but also just to level set, like where the business is. Like people aren't, it's very rare that people are making money in theatrical distribution
right.
and for docs, because people don't buy tickets to docs anymore. And then even if you license your film to a streamer, you don't make that much money off of it. You make a tiny fraction. This is what I think, like when people say the business model is broken, like the business model is broken because the big fish aren't making money off our films. And that I think is like an important thing to recognize. Like even if a lot of the films that you see on Netflix are films they licensed for not as much money as it cost that film to
Oh,
make.
I'm experiencing it
Like,
right now where the investor
yeah,
is not going to see half of their money back,
no.
and it's going to start on Prime next week, and it's all revenue share deals.
Right.
They won't even tell you what is the payout per view or by click. I mean, this is really disturbing because they have everything to gain, and the filmmaker and production company and investor has everything to lose. So
Yeah.
it's like weeding out these filmmakers slowly but surely so that it's like people are like aren't going to come to the well to even put water in anymore. We're just going to say, but I'm not a defeatist. I'll continue to make movies. I'll continue to reinvent myself with the machine. The
Right.
problem is, in my last year's experience, I didn't feel like the machine was willing to look at the successes of this particular title and work with it to say, well, how do we take this momentum that we didn't even have to invest in,
Yeah.
but let's like take it to that next level.
We've got to move on, Michael, but
Yeah,
you know,
thank
I think Kathleen's point is important, that we can't just rely on distributor to come in as the end goal and getting to a streamer as, you know, the end goal in terms of you know, something that leads to more financial success, for one thing, or maybe even more eyeballs. You know, I mean, a lot of this comes down to what our definition of success is. You know, to me, you know, I work with a lot of filmmakers as a consultant, and one of the things I always start off with end goals and work backwards, but I also always ask them, you know, what would success for this film look like to you? And you know, when I work with as a producer on, you know, with filmmakers, I often work with first-time filmmakers. It's like, you know, I always say, like, to me, success is you came away making the film that you set out to make, hopefully even better than you set out to make, and that you're happy with the film, because at the end of the day, that may be all you have, you know. That's the important thing, that you didn't compromise your vision of the film. You made the film you set out to, and it sounds like that's what you did. But anyway, thank you for sharing that. We have to move on. Elizabeth.
I'm so sorry. I have to go. I have to go pick up my
Okay.
kid.
Thank you so much, Iyabo. Thank you for staying on, and thank you for being here and sharing. Really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Great talking with everybody, and thanks, Kathleen, as well. Have a good one.
Thanks. Great to chat.
Hey everyone, I'm going to make this really quick. Thanks, Kathleen and Doug, for your time. Really appreciate it. I am a director and producer of independent feature docs. I wanted to just touch on two things really fast. The fundraising side of this world. Over the last 10 years, I've taught myself how to fundraise from like high net worth individuals and family foundations. I've raised a few $1,000,000 for my projects and the impact campaigns. I would say that these people are a lot more accessible than you realize. I just want to encourage everybody on here. If you look at the producers and executive producers of docs that are aligning with the topics that you want to make your films on, you're able to contact those people. You will be able to reach them and talk to them, their assistants. I've cold called donors I've received funding from. It's all very, very possible. And also I look for the logos and the organizational credits within the film that have supported them through grants, through their family foundations and so forth. It is doable. There's a lot of money in philanthropy, and people right now, philanthropists, they're trying to move their money into topics that they care about. And so I just suggest reaching out to those folks as much as you can, using just the power of the internet. I started doing this in my mid-20s. I'm 35 now, and I've still been able to successfully fundraise for my films over the last 10 years with primarily soft funding from these donors. So again, like I really just encourage you guys to use the internet as a resource to reach out to whoever you want. They'll be more responsive than you think. And secondly, with an impact campaign, I really, really focus my work on impact. And I've been able to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars for an impact campaign in the wildlife conservation world. And I've partnered with the University of Oxford to do our impact campaign analysis. I think that if you have an impact campaign, no matter if it's really small or big, if you have an academic partner for analysis, or if you're looking at new ways to analyze your work, more and more people will be willing to fund you. And so I'd be happy to answer any questions y'all have about either like fundraising or impact. I really just want to give back to this community and share what I've learned over the years. And I'll just put my email on the chat here.
Thank
Nice
you,
meeting you
Elizabeth.
guys.
Thank you. You're going to make a lot of new friends here very quickly. Devin and then Peter, and that will take us home.
Hi. I guess I want to sort of put out a big idea, which is that we're kind of facing the same monopoly issue that the rest of the economy is facing. This is our industry, but we're facing a monopoly of attention. I'm a Canadian filmmaker. I've got a film called The Hands That Feed Us, and I made it for Canadians. I realize this is an American, I guess, group, or primarily American group. And I guess over the time that it's taken me to make this film, I have been watching the last vestiges of our Canadian independent, our Canadian industry as opposed to our international industry kind of crumble away. So I look at myself as a niche filmmaker making a film for a niche that has 40 million people in it, Canadians. And that niche is no longer supporting an internal industry because Canadians have stopped watching Canadian media. We watch global media or American media, I suppose. Our attention is being monopolized by Netflix, all of these giant distributors that everyone here is chasing, because they're the only ones that have any money left. All of the other niches don't function as markets anymore. And this is, I think, what has happened with our distributors. Distributors were historically a way to sell into a particular market, and the value of the distributor was that they had access to that niche market, whatever that is. And as our attention has been monopolized and has shifted away from historical entertainment to, just global internet, the tech companies have all our attention. So I think that in terms of how do we react to that as filmmakers, we can either go where the attention is and chase that monopoly, or we have to somehow separate our culture. And I really do think building our own audiences and building distributors as they were built originally, one person at a time, individual people who want to watch the kinds of films that we're making. That's really what we have to be thinking about, and that is a huge job. And as someone said earlier, ideally we're just filmmakers. We don't have to worry about that, but we do. The only way that distribution is going to be rebuilt is if we do it ourselves. I think that's more or less what I had to say. And thanks.
Thanks for sharing, Devin. Peter, you are our final
Okay. Well, I'm coming at filmmaking from a TV point of view, mostly in front of the camera, and now I've taken on producing and directing and editing and marketing my own series. But the point I want to make here is this is disintermediation in a business term, right? All of these gatekeepers, PBS, Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the different distribution companies, the streaming platforms, they are gatekeepers. And, there's 2.7 billion people using YouTube. There's 120 million Americans using TikTok. There are plenty of people on these platforms making money. They're not just making money selling widgets, and it's not just pick up your phone and, brain fart out there and or your cats. So what I think there's so much opportunity for us to adjust our output to these different distribution platforms and to be able to have advertiser supported, subscription supported. It's just a different way of doing it. And it's hard. It's really difficult because if that's not your world, there's millions and billions of people for whom that is their distribution platform. So I think that the opportunities without the gatekeepers is much bigger if we can make our content distributable on those platforms in a way that suits the viewers, right? It's all about the viewers. So that's my takeaway from this wonderful session. Again, you guys, D word, amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Good note to go out on too. To me, it's all about empowering ourselves, and there's new technologies available to us. I mean, it started with the cheap camcorders and, cameras and the affordable editing systems, and we have the power in our hands. And I think we just have to shift our mindset and realize, we can't just go to a festival and get a bidding war among distributors and have them get it out onto Netflix and all will be well with the world, We don't live in that world. I don't think we ever did live in that world, actually, but we certainly don't live in it now. Anyway, thank you, Kathleen. Thank you so much. Folks, sign up for her Substack. It's great. It's really, really essential reading, and so appreciate you being here.
And can I just say,
save the
to
chat.
everyone who joined, I put my email in the chat, so if anyone wants to reach out, I honestly think the best thing we can do right now is share information. So if you have any filmmaking community besides D word, like, I think everyone just needs to sort of come together and give insight, tell other people what you're hearing, what you know, because that's the way that we'll be able to surface ideas. And I'm also open to if people have ideas of things they would like me to cover in my Substack, or people that they'd like me to interview for my Substack, I'm definitely open to recommendations. Because I want my Substack to be interesting and useful to this community. So thank you, Doug, for including me. I'm very touched. It's really wonderful to be able to talk in community about the issues that we all face.
Thank you. You were so helpful, and really appreciate your being here. Can we lure you down to Slam Dance in a few weeks?
Maybe. I'm not sure.
Anyway, thank you folks for being here. This was a really, really great session. I hope it was helpful, and I hope, we came here with this idea of, is the documentary feature on its last legs, and I think it was really, really important to hear fresh ideas and talk about how we can move forward from here.